Hi, my name's Matt Gleed, and on today's Matrix Fitness question and answer, I'm joined by Steve. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, Matt. Seems funny talking to you and telling you about myself, but yeah, I'm Steve Barrett. I'm the Global Director of Training and Education for Johnson Health Tech, which is the parent company of Matrix Fitness.
Great. Well, it's great to have you on, Steve, because obviously the role that I have these days as the Matrix Master Trainer was almost created by yourself, and I'm kind of walking in within your shadow, so to speak. So it's great to have you on, sharing some interesting insights into the global business that you now operate in. I was wondering if it's okay, Steve, you could just kind of give us a little bit of your background as to what it has been in fitness and kind of your story up to now with work, really.
Well, you're certainly not operating in my shadows, because I was involved in your recruitment before I left working for Matrix UK, and what you've done there has been absolutely fantastic. So I'm very proud of the legacy, let's maybe call it that, the legacy that I left for you to sort of build upon with the Matrix UK brand. So I think your question was a little bit of background. Well, these days I tend to get described as a veteran within the fitness industry. But I think that anyone who survives 3 years in the fitness industry can be called a veteran sometimes. So as I enter my 50s, I think back and I started in the industry when I was 18 years old. And I've had a series of fortunate, lucky breaks, opportunities. And my very, very first one of those was actually working for a chap who went on to start a very large training company that is called Premier Global, which has recently worked together with the NASM from across in the USA. So that was really my first move into fitness, having been an athlete myself. Gosh, such a long time ago. I spent 24 years working with Reebok in various roles. Initially, I was a trainer, a presenter, and then as I moved forward over the years, over the decades, I moved more into product and program development with Reebok. I went through over 50 countries. Initially, I was on a year's contract with Reebok, and I managed to make that last for 24 years. So fun and games. And then I've worked for another few big brands within the organization of the fitness industry. Consumer-based and commercial-based. I work with Escape Fitness. A lot of people might remember me from videos and working at trade shows. And then I did some very large projects for the likes of Nestle, Kellogg's, developing online and consumer-based programs, one of which was used by 31 million people around the world. And now, for the last 3 years, I've been working with Matrix. I'm part of the global marketing team based out of Cottage Grove, Madison, Wisconsin in the USA. And we, as the global HQ for marketing and product development, basically work on all of the creative and all of the engineering and all of the development of the fantastic products that Matrix sell around the world.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, it's certainly a strong background. I mean, my first thoughts of you were on the Escape stands, if I'm honest, going to all the trade shows that I used to go to as a younger trainer myself. And yeah, there was always a stand which stood out, which was the Escape Fitness stand. And it was pretty much down to the energy that you put on it. And, the way that you kind of incorporated that energy, I think during this interview, you're going to hopefully pass some of that wisdom across as to how you have looked to recruit people with energy, and also some insights as to how people can create almost qualities which would be used, especially at a time like this where so many people are doing online work. So I'm really looking forward to kind of getting to some of those stories, really. At the moment, though, Steve, you've mentioned a couple of the projects in the past. What sort of projects are you working on with Matrix at the moment?
So my key focus with Matrix is, in the past, I've very much worked on the creation of hardware, on actual equipment projects, and creating the things that people use within facilities. But my focus these days is very much upon programming and education to get the best return on investment for our customers who invest in our products. So I'm working on a couple of interesting projects at the moment, which really maximize and improve people's understanding of existing technology that we already have. So I'm very focused at the moment on Sprint8. And Sprint8 is an incredibly successful program, which is effectively a button on a lot of our cardiovascular equipment. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to evolve that from being a kind of self-service product where you push a button, you do Sprint8. And I'm trying to evolve it into a group training experience. So a lot of what I'm focusing on is the role of the instructor, how the instructor can improve, enhance the person's experience of doing Sprint8 in a group. Because my background is in group training, and I often am heard saying that nothing beats live. So I love an experience when I go for a workout, and if a trainer is involved, generally the purpose of the trainer being involved is to lift and to raise that experience. So I'm very focused on Sprint8 at the moment, and what's interesting about Sprint8 is it can be done on many different modalities. There's a different sensation from doing it on a treadmill compared to a recumbent bike, compared to an ascent trainer. So I'm trying to basically establish a process and a protocol where I can explain to people who are part of a group training experience that, for example, doing it on the recumbent cycle isn't an easy option. Sprint8 is never easy. So that's what I'm really focusing on, and turning that into a workshop. Then I'm also working on something where I'm working with one of our cardiovascular products, where it's another group training opportunity and really getting the most out of a little piece of technology that we've got. So I won't go into too much detail on that one, but pretty much everything that I do is focused on empowering trainers to connect, to educate, and to obviously improve the health and fitness of our customers.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, it certainly sounds interesting. And the Sprint8, I was aware that you were working on some components for that. And having done the Sprint8 several times myself, I agree, it's an incredible workout. It is one of the workouts that whenever I'm bringing the team of master trainers currently together from the UK team, we will always do Sprint8 as our morning workout, because I think it's a great way to actually freshen up your body and at the same time finely tune your mind and create some focus, so that when we go into our meetings, everybody has got a little bit more just a little bit more switched on, really.
Yeah, and I've seen it in action at the HQ. We have a fantastic facility over at Cottage Grove, and there's people that go and do Sprint8 on their own, and they get all the physiological benefits from going through the process. But when you do it as part of a group, it really is transformational. And what we're doing with this, which is going to enhance it even more, is the Sprint8 sprint component is only half of the project, because we then have something called e-lifts, which complements the sprint intensity fantastically well. And again, I'm turning that into a group training experience. So not necessarily on machines, but something where a trainer can lead a group of people through a series of exercises. And I have to say that doing it in a group is a completely different experience from doing it on your own. When you're on your own, that little exercise paradox, that little thing on your shoulder going, oi, quit, it kicks in much, much sooner than when you are next to your peers, next to your friends, next to someone that you sort of want to, not necessarily impress, but perform. So it's going to be an absolutely fantastic one. And I can't wait to share it with the master trainers. I think a lot of the master trainers are under the impression that because Sprint8 already exists, it can't be that big a deal. But what we're doing here is, we're creating a manual, a workshop, like we always do, an implementation guide, and all of the marketing support that goes around launching a product and a program within a commercial facility. So I can reach across here and, grab one of our training manuals. You'll recognize the Matrix Ride manual there. They're never small documents, but that's just a tiny component of product and program development within the Matrix organization. So it's not just me, there is a village that creates all of these products.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, it has to go out to such a large global audience now as well. It's not a case of creating something that you think would work in one gym. That when you put a project together, you've always got to think about, well, one, how is this going to be implemented? And we need to guide gyms into what best practice is. But also the fact that we have to train, potentially, 20 plus countries all within around about a month. And those people coming together, they might not always, have English as their first language. So they always have to have, maybe there's some interpreters, or there might just be the fact that they have to receive that information, take time to digest it before it launches. And I'm a big believer in when you're learning something, it's great to go out and self-practice and use a sample group to give it a go. But there's a big difference between a soft launch and a hard launch in terms of when you actually fully understand something and you practice it yourself, that's great. But don't go and launch it in a whole club of 30 classes a week and expect it to really fly, because there needs to be almost like a bedding in time to really practice, especially on a global audience these days.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in particular with something like Sprint8, practicing what you preach is incredibly important, but it's not the type of thing you can do 3 times a day. So generally when you practice something, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. With Sprint8, the recommendations is you would have a day in between. But when we put on workshops and when we train master trainers to come into our team, obviously we have a really intense experience. So the Sprint8 workshop will be a really, really interesting one. But on your point of getting everybody up to speed, this is where it comes down to selecting the right people in the first place, because it takes a certain type of person who will take on that responsibility to self-improve themselves. So, our workshops for creating master trainers are 2 intense days, but it's by no means a 2-day process for that trainer to then be ready to go out and present. So it's the practice, it's the rehearsal time that a person goes through once they've actually been through the training module with myself that will be the difference between them being successful or mediocre when they go out to present it to our Matrix customers.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. So when you're selecting these instructors, because I mean, how many countries are we talking about?
So we currently have, we describe them as SBUs. So around the world, we have 28 subsidiaries that are wholly owned by Matrix. So they are basically Matrix owned entities. Then we have a number of distributors who are kind of valued partners who sell Matrix in various other countries. Across the SBUs and distributors, we now have 64 master trainers. So some countries have multiple master trainers, and some of them have got sort of one expert who focuses on all of the programs. A lot of it is depending upon the size of the business in that country, but also the expertise available, because I'd much rather have one person who was really, really busy and really, really incredible rather than spread it thinly. So we've got 64 at the moment, and we're actually recruiting. We've seen such success with Matrix Ride and the CXP bikes, and particularly in North America, we are looking to recruit some more master trainers. But it's a constant process as well, because, for example, we've just established a new SBU over in Russia, and that means they now need master trainers. So the process will continue, and we'll continue to recruit and train up new master trainers.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So with the role that I have working for various companies as well, as a master trainer, I do get it a lot where trainers will say to me, oh, how do I do your job? And I always feel almost a double-edged sword. One side is it's a compliment because clearly I've inspired them or I've given them an insight as to what I do, and it's flattering. But at the same time, there's part of me that goes, you got no chance. I like my job and I want it, so you're not having it. There's always this sort of double-edged sword between, selecting the right people, like you say, for the right work that they're going to do, checking out their kind of their backgrounds. How do you go on and select what you deem as the appropriate trainers then?
Do you know what, Matt? It's interesting you have those conversations with people, because I find it incredibly difficult to recruit good people. And I think it's because the fitness industry is different from what it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we didn't have online influencers, and we didn't have a sort of section, a subsection of the industry that people were aspiring to get into. So when I started out and, you know, opportunities came up with people like Reebok, wow, that was the gold standard. You know, to be a Reebok master trainer and then subsequently a global master trainer with Reebok, there was nothing higher than that. Absolutely nothing. You couldn't go higher than that. You know, that was the key to the door to present at the biggest conventions in the world, and people wanted that job. But now I think that there's a slight disconnect between the B2C and the B2B. So as master trainers, we're involved in B2B activity, and I think a lot of trainers in industry now, they want to talk to consumers direct, and the way they're going to do that is to be an influencer and do it online. So I actually sometimes come across situations where I think this person could be a fantastic master trainer, and when I have that conversation, the person doesn't know what a master trainer is. And I think that the terminology perhaps has been devalued over the years. Some organizations would create a master trainer simply by presenting a person with a t-shirt that said master trainer on the back. And I've always been completely dead against that. You know, I look at this as a kind of hierarchical situation where the master trainer is, you know, a rank above, many ranks above a trainer within a club. You know, the word master has a purpose in front of their title. So for me, it's difficult to recruit trainers because sometimes I have to explain what it is. But I also get the flip side that I get people approaching me who want to be master trainers, and the conversation really can't go anywhere for, well, a number of reasons, should we say. But, you know, you have people that apply all the time, and then you see people and you approach them and sort of say, look, these opportunities exist. Would you be interested?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great insight, because there are a lot of people who are very good at personal training or teaching classes, but there is a different skill set to, like you say, working with B2B. They might be having this incredible energy, but there needs to be a level of, as a master trainer, communication skills, being able to actually educate and actually be able to deliver with poise and purpose a lot of different content as well. So I think what I'd like to do, Steve, is almost move the conversation on to, well, how can trainers actually develop their skills? Because at the moment, there's obviously this lockdown situation. There's a lot of people who are at home, and in many ways, their gyms are shut. They're either not got any work, or what they're doing is they're delivering online workouts. So could you maybe just share some of your personal insights as to, well, what characteristics and qualities do people or maybe aspire to work on or look to develop in this sort of time?
Matt, I think there's a number of different sort of spokes to that wheel. I'm just gonna close off the question about you know, people becoming master trainers and things like that. And there's a little word of caution here, that we now live in a world of transparency. And you know, in the old days, when I was looking at people on their resume, on their CV, you would look down it, and it might be the university they went to, the companies they worked for, and so on. And that was your due diligence. That was almost the research you could do. Quite often there'd be a reference on there, and, you know, working in the industry, you'd recognize the person and you think, well, if that person's given them a reference, they're good enough for me. These days with social media, there's that level of transparency where you've got a digital footprint. And literally last week, I had a fantastic resume come into my inbox, and I had a look at it and I thought, oh, this person stacks up. This person could go out and represent the brand. They look as if they have the educational background. They have enough industry experience and so on. So I went and had a little look at their social media background and couldn't go near them. Just couldn't go near them. You know, as a nearly $1 billion business, when I send a master trainer out to represent the brand, that person is the brand. And therefore they have to be, you know, extremely professional in the here and now, but also what else they've done in the past. So, you know, this person was saying things that I just couldn't couldn't condone. And therefore that was the end of the conversation. So that fantastic resume added up to nothing. Yeah. And I've now forgotten what the next question was.
Yeah. No, that's a great insight. So what's really interesting there is that with the world of kind of applying for master trainer work, I remember being given an application form and it asked me to list the articles and the media that I'd written in and the TV appearances I had. And at the time, I hadn't had any. Now, obviously, that
you get that lucky break.
Yeah, I almost, would it be inappropriate to write, not at the moment, but I'm planning on getting the job with you and then doing a lot more. I mean, you kind of almost can't put that on the application form. So at the time, it's interesting that so many people now have that digital footprint that you didn't have back then. And it's interesting that now you do need to be mindful about what you post online. And I guess the kind of the next question feeds into that. Well, now that we've created that digital footprint, how can people almost learn the qualities that it would take to further develop not only their skills as a personal trainer, but almost what are the things that you would be impressed by that you think around the globe, because you've got an incredible insight into what's happening all around the world now. What should people be working on in order to develop their skill set and just to almost finish off them as a person which can actually go out there and create business digitally these days?
Yeah, I personally have always chosen my inspiration and my influences very carefully, but I've also looked outside of the fitness industry. So in the context of being a master trainer, being a presenter, I spent a lot of time going to conferences, conventions as a participant, and there would be certain people that I would watch and I would analyze really, really deeply about the little pauses that they made, the visual interaction that they had with the participants. And I learned as much as I could from those, maybe 1 hour, 2 hour presentations that I was in. And then I started to look outside of the industry to people that I thought had some type of ability for making those connections or getting information across. I mean, these days you've got the most incredible resource in TED Talks. And, there's a reason a TED Talk is 18 minutes long. It's because the people who have been chosen to present them are such experts on their subject that they can get the information across in just 18 minutes. So you can look for your inspiration outside of the industry. And I think that, if I'm perfectly honest, that's one of my biggest bits of advice, that the best presenters don't necessarily exist within the fitness industry. Just going back to a point you made earlier about, having credentials and credibility when coming into roles, I'm always happy to take a gamble on somebody who does not have a conventional background, should we say. So I've got one master trainer that springs to mind, who his boss put him forward and said, I'd really like this person to be our master trainer. On paper, he hadn't been an educator. He'd never stood in front of a group, but he had various other qualities. And he has gone on to be one of our most successful master trainers anywhere, with regard to the feedback that we get from customers, but also the kind of the revenue that he generates within the business as well. Yeah. So I'm always happy to kind of be a little bit unconventional, but I think the key thing that people can learn is to look outside of our industry. It's a little bit jokey, but I think I learned a lot of my stage work, my stage play, from watching people like Freddie Mercury run around Wembley Stadium. Absolutely nothing to do with education, information, but the ability to interact with a crowd and use timing and your voice and your projection are all things that I would never learn within the fitness industry. But, watching him do something like that, you can pick up nuggets if you really, really focus and look at what they're doing, because people like that, nothing happens by accident.
No, and that's an incredible insight, because obviously the fitness industry has actually gone down that path. And you look at companies like SoulCycle, and where they actually have gone after actors and actresses and almost people who are really into their music, and they've got that music ability, and then they can teach somebody how to ride a bike but they've got this raw skill and passion, and there's actually a lot of that. I think as the fitness industry as a whole, we've definitely moved away from the personal trainer counting to 10 reps. standing over somebody, spotting them with the weights. Now, there's always a market for that, and some people will package that as a strength and conditioning coach, and I think that does a disservice to the strength and conditioning coach, because at that point, it's not about counting to 10, it's about the programming, which really becomes important. So I think the industry has massively changed since I first entered as a personal trainer. But it's really interesting that you mentioned the kind of the actors and and people like that who potentially could really come into our role, and they can hold an audience. And I think that's where successful personal trainers really shine through. They hold a captive audience. That might be 30, 40 hours of personal training a week. It might just be a class where they have 50 participants in, and they might only do 10 hours a week, and they get a great amount of revenue from working hard. But they have to master the skill of holding that audience in their hand, really.
Yeah, and I think you could definitely point towards kind of a lot of the boutique operators now, where they look to recruit and retain their rock star presenters, because people are going to come to their facility because they heard that Jake is teaching the 6 o'clock boot class. So yeah, we do have to look outside the industry, and I've been involved in conversations with boutique operators where they're going to musical theatre, and they're going to nightclubs, and they're finding their performers through that modality. And like you say, they can put them through a personal training course to kind of tick a few boxes, but it's much harder to create that attitude from within. So it's really important for trainers to kind of be very critical of themselves. I am massively critical of myself. I really don't like watching myself on video. I don't really listen to myself and stuff like that. But sometimes I make myself just watch performances back and presentations back to see where I could just fine tune it a little bit, or maybe cut it a little bit shorter, and get feedback from other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And Steve, I mean, you've been in front of cameras a lot, and at the moment there are going to be a lot of fitness people who are standing in front of their own social media cameras, trying to film audiences to either try and service their clients that they've got, or to try and make a bit of a name for themselves as well. So where there's a lot of people who have kind of this raw aspiration of improving themselves, and it's a great time with this lockdown for self-development, what tips could you offer for somebody who hasn't necessarily done that much, but maybe in terms of your experience of being in front of the camera? Because I know you've done quite a lot of that over numerous amounts of years.
Yeah. And if I'm honest, nobody prepared me for it, and nobody taught me how to do it. It wasn't until about 15 years after I started going on camera that anybody actually told me what to do. So I had a really good experience. I went to the USA, and I went to QVC on camera school. Now, in the UK, QVC is probably that big, but in America, QVC is that big. It's a huge organization and massive business. And like I say, about 15 years after I started doing stuff on camera, I had to go and get trained to go live on air with QVC. And that was incredible to learn a bit of sort of stagecraft and working with cameras. But not everybody's going to have that opportunity. So the biggest tip I can give people is practice in private, perform in public. Simple as that. So going live shouldn't be your first port of call. You should record yourself, watch yourself back, listen to it a few different times, and really practice in private before you go and perform in public. Because what a lot of trainers will realize is that it's not necessarily for them. There are some people who can communicate through the camera and have that almost sort of ability to multitask, because that's what you're doing. You're already thinking of your next question, aren't you?
Well, yeah,
so
there are loads more I'd love to get you the comments on, but
yeah. So what I'm saying is genuinely, if people are looking to do this, they need to practice in private and perform in public, because I've seen a lot of content which has been rushed onto the airwaves, and you look back at it and you think, right, that's there forever. And it's something which we get better as time goes on, but there's a lot of people who could do with practicing in private before they go public.
So if we take that into some practical skills then, auto cues or having a script available? You know, is that something that people should work and practice on?
Yeah, I don't really like people reading off a script on camera. And I know it's okay to have a few bullet points or a few little notes just off camera, but to just literally stand there and read something, you know, send me a PDF. I don't need the trainer if that's what they're going to be doing. Auto cue is an interesting one. There's been some incredible technology come along in the last few years. In the old days, auto cue was a massive kind of manual contraction, but nowadays it's all automated and you can get auto cue systems that work off your iPhone. So it really comes back to preparation. So practice in private, perform in public. Quite often when I've created a video which is maybe 30 minutes long, there could have been 5 or 6 hours preparation to make that happen. You know, a little 2-minute piece to camera where I'm sort of saying, hi everybody, hope you had a nice day. That's just me chatting. But if there's something where I have to genuinely hit the mark, make sure that I'm on brand and get a very clear, concise, specific message across, then that takes practice. Because, I mean, I'm not great with names, for example. I'm not one of these people that can recall the references to medical studies and that type of thing. So for me, I have to really, really practice hard if that's going to come across naturally.
Yeah, well, I think that's good advice for people, because I think there's a lot of people now who are trying to put out a message of social media and to always look after the members that they've got as you know, whether that's a member of a gym or whether it's just servicing their own client base. And I think they really should think about, if they're going to try and facilitate that home user, they really need to have that clear understanding about, well, what is the user that I'm actually going to be speaking to? Because I know certainly in this whole kind of lockdown situation, the first week I was watching the workouts on Facebook and Instagram, and oh my word, I mean, you know, I'm surprised people's knees were being held together by tape because there were so many.
I'm sorry, Matt, I think we lost our connection a bit there.
Oh, I was just saying that the incredible thing about the workouts that I saw initially were so many people were jumping around and doing such intense HIIT training workouts. And these are people who are trying to talk and it's just the wrong message, isn't it? They were thinking about the workouts that they were doing as opposed to thinking about, well, what does their member need? Do they need to do HIIT training once or twice a week and then some yoga? And do they need to think about some mobility work? And what about the preparation? So it's not about showcasing all of your skills in one 20-minute workout, but actually building an activity and a schedule, especially in a lockdown period like this.
Matt, there's been trainers and there's been people in the industry who've been asking members of the public to be active 7 days a week. And these are members of the public who have been paying and been quite happy to pay for something which makes them active 1.2 or 1.5 times per week. And then suddenly we've expected them to become a 7 times a week participant and do it at incredibly high intensities. So I heard some very, very smart advice quite early on in this situation, where it was basically saying to understand the levels of stress and the environment that the person is existing in at the moment, and to be happy to maintain their activity levels rather than exceed their previous activity levels just because they've supposedly got more time on their hands. So yeah, I totally agree with you. From a presentation point of view, I've seen some horrible examples of trainers who can't actually practice what they're preaching. And that's just a personal thing for me. It's kind of like, I wouldn't ask anybody to do anything that I couldn't do. In the past, as a personal trainer, you know, I've slogged around half marathons, etc., because one of my clients wanted it to be one of their personal challenges. So yeah, I've seen a lot of trainers on camera doing stuff badly. And I've actually, within Matrix, we've had to make decisions about certain types of exercises that we're happy to put online, and certain types that we believe require the interaction and close supervision of our master trainers and personal trainers in clubs. So for example, you know, we've created some really nice, cool, HIIT workouts as opposed to red hot HIIT workouts. We've done some firm, we've done some strong, some mobility and flexibility work, but we've steered clear of things like MX4 Active, which is a very, very high focus from the trainer to the participant interaction. So I think it's a really important time to kind of choose your weapons wisely and not just throw everything at people and expect them to understand what it is you're asking them to do. And asking them to go from 1.5 times a week up to 7 times a week is just not sustainable or practical.
No, I think that's great. Well, Steve, in closing then, could you give us any insight as to what you think the future of fitness is going to be? Because obviously at some point the doors of gyms are going to reopen. There will be floods of people who want to go back to the gym, but I think there's a lot of people who have this thought process, and especially in some of the webinars and some of the conferences that I've been enjoying online, they're talking about why would people rush back to how it used to be when we can actually rush back to something in the future and look forward to something as well. So what do you think the future of fitness is going to be then?
Yeah, Matt, I think that there's a really interesting conversation about operators who have given their customers access to virtual products as an alternative to being able to come and use the bricks and mortar facility. And there's going to be a number of people who are quite enjoying the fact that they can roll out of bed, flick a screen and do their workout without getting in the car or traveling to a club. So there'll be people who are assessing what they need to be fit and to interact with fitness. For me, I say it all the time, nothing beats live. And I did a sarcastic little post about myself last night where I said, I'm really missing the people that I never talked to at the gym. So just being around people is really important for me. You know me, I'll stand on a stage and I'll talk to everybody. I spend a lot of time in this little 6x6 box here. And it's really nice to get out and go to the gym. So for me, nothing much will change. But I think for a lot of people, they will have discovered alternative methods for getting their fitness fix. And they'll continue with those and not necessarily go back to the bricks and mortar unless the bricks and mortar gives them a really good reason. So one of the things I saw online a couple of days ago was, in our sort of anticipation of rushing back to normal, what we really should do is assess if normal is worth rushing back to. So, we don't want to get back to normal if we actually look at the past and think, well, that wasn't actually a great experience. So did my PT actually do anything more than count the reps? Was sort of there. I can do that for myself. I found a fantastic virtual experience. So it's going to come down to companies in the fitness industry giving people a valid reason to go back to those physical facilities. For me, I love the interaction of just being around people. You and I know that people love group training experiences. Even if they're not interacting and conversing with people in the room, it's the fact that they're there with other people in the room. And like I said earlier on about Sprint8, you can do Sprint8 by pressing a button and you'll get all the physiological benefits. But boy, do you get a different buzz when you do it in a room full of people with similar attitudes and motivation levels. So that's where I think it's going to go. There'll be some winners and there'll be some losers.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Steve. I really do believe that the industry has got an incredible opportunity to actually develop. And this situation is definitely kind of given us a big kick. But I do honestly believe that the industry can learn a lot and develop and almost drag ourselves into what our customers actually want and need, rather than just historical kind of usage. And we go back to, like you say, what that normal used to be. So I think that's great, Steve. Steve, I'd just like to say thank you very much for spending the time with us today. Really appreciate you giving up some of your time to share your interest and your kind of insights into what other trainers could do as well.
Matt, my absolute pleasure. It's been great to talk to you. I expect the next time we meet in person is I'll probably run through some of the work I've been developing for Sprint8, because I always like to look to some of the master trainers to get some input and some feedback because, hey, I don't have all the answers. So I'm really looking forward to that in the near future. Maybe we'll be able to meet up at one of the Matrix showcase clubs somewhere in the UK. But yeah, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and be nice to each other. Just keep talking to each other.